All right, we're back here on the Chase Thomas podcast, where I am now joined by a first-timer. He is an expert in all things giant hawks. People would not think so, but yes, that was a thing in the early 80s with the Iowa Hawkeyes. Some of the best uniforms in college football, one of my favorite logos, and a program that I think is in an interesting spot. It's Tom Kakert. Tom, good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me on and able to talk a little bit about Iowa football.
Absolutely. I know you don't get to do it enough. Tom. So, and I think a lot of my Knoxville and Atlanta folks, it's kind of wild. I originally from Atlanta, and I just even the neighbor across the street from my parents' house, Iowa stuff in their house, and I saw a weird amount of Iowa stuff in Atlanta. Not as much in Knoxville, I've noticed, but Iowa, they're all over the place. So I think there's going to be some crossover here with some Iowa folks who are like, oh, awesome Iowa coverage. But I want to start with the spring game. So
Sure.
what did you take away? Was there anything that you could really pull? I know it depends on who you talk to about like what you can really glean from spring game, and everyone's spring games are under different circumstances where like Tennessee didn't have any corners. So it's like, what can you really gauge from it? What did you gauge from the Iowa spring game this year?
Iowa was kind of in the same boat. It was a lot of guys were out or they were trying to keep them safe, not risk them in that final practice. So it was the shortest spring game that we've ever seen. It was really short. It was like an hour and a half between the practice and the scrimmage part. So usually it's about 2 hours, 2:15, something like that. So it was really short. Not a lot to glean. Everybody's talking about the quarterbacks because that's what we do, because there is kind of a quarterback race, if you will. But and the guy who's the incumbent, Spencer Petras, didn't look great out of the gate. But the two guys behind him, Alex Padilla, who played some last year, and Joe Labus, who was a redshirt last year, redshirt freshman, both those guys looked really good early. And then about midway, Petras looks good, and the other two guys fade back a little bit. So it's kind of, I walked away going, yeah, we're about where we started. So I'll just, the thing I always come back to is I expect that Petras is going to start. And then if things go poorly, maybe the rope's a little tighter this time around.
What do fans want? When you're on the rivals boards and you're reading what fans are clamoring for? Is it Padilla? Is it Petras? Is it like bring back Deuce Hogan? Is it Labas? Like who is it? Who is the guy?
Yeah, it's interesting because they've kind of gotten out on Petras. I mean, that first year coming out, the pandemic year was his first year as a starter. It was just a tough situation. He had spent a lot of time in quarantine, just never getting COVID, but just being exposed or being in close contacts kind of thing. So the continuity just never got there with the pass game. They got better kind of towards the end of the year, but it was still up and down. And last year it was up and down. We got to see Padilla last year. He actually started a couple games, came in relief at Northwestern when Petras was hurt and clearly couldn't go. After one series, it was real clear that they're not going to be able to play him. So he came in, but overall his stats were not any better than Petras. He had 2 interceptions, 2 touchdowns, completed 49% of his passes. They weren't great. So they went back to, in fact, the second half of the Nebraska game, they went back to Petras and he rallied them to a win at Nebraska. So he started the Big Ten championship game, which was a disaster for Iowa, and then started the bowl game. So I think usually they clamor for the backup. I think everybody's kind of like, yeah, Padilla's probably ahead of Petras, but we're not. Labus is like the flavor of the month right now. He just is.
Is there something different about him? Does he bring something different to the table? He's a redshirt freshman. Like what is it just because of the youth and just the unknown with him? He's just the unknown quantity. Is that all it is?
Yeah, and he got some buzz last year, scout team. So he wasn't even running the Iowa offense, but he was doing the scout team, and he kind of a little edge to him, kind of a little bit of toughness and moxie. And I had gone to see him actually as a high school player
Mm,
during the pandemic year. Just drove out to Ohio because didn't have anything else to do really. So I
yeah.
went to see him play high school game, and he's got some toughness to him. He's got a little edge to him.
Mm,
Not a cannon for an arm, but a good arm, solid arm. He's a good baseball player. So he's got some whip to it. But he, you know, he's just a fresh face, and Kirk Ferentz has kind of poo-pooed him and a little bit, just saying, let's. He hasn't even run our offense really yet. Let's
mm-hmm.
slow the roll. And the one thing I've found out just during the off season is that they've kind of simplified the offense a little bit.
Hmm.
There was a comment that Alex Padilla made in leading up to the bowl game about how it took like a year and a half to master the Iowa offense. Now you would think, boy, that's weird because that's not. It doesn't seem like a very sophisticated offense.
Mm-hmm.
But what they do is they ask the quarterbacks to do a lot of different things, reading the defense and adjusting at the line, more than other college programs would.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's part of what they're doing. But I think they've simplified some of the pass game stuff. They've brought in an analyst
Hmm.
for the quarterback position. The quarterback coach, Ken O'Keefe, retired. So Brian Ferentz, who's an offensive line coach by trade, offensive coordinator now, um, he's now the quarterback's coach. He had never played the position, let alone coached it.
Mm-hmm.
They've brought in a guy named John Budmeyer, who was at Wisconsin and worked under Paul Chryst. Then last year went to Colorado State, was the OC under Steve Adazio and also the quarterback coach there. Now Adazio and those guys got bounced after the year.
Mm-hmm.
So Budmeyer just didn't have a gig, so they were pretty fortunate and get him in as an analyst. So I think he's doing some work, just kind of trying to simplify the offense, simplify some of the things that the quarterbacks are doing. And based on what the quarterbacks have said, it seems like it's been a help to them.
That's interesting. And I mean, there was a lot of talk. I mean, one of the frustrating things I imagine for Iowa fans is just that, like, you had this all-time great defense and the takeaways was just unreal. It was just an unreal run where the defense was doing everything possible to keep this Iowa team moving in the right direction. And you get all the way up into the top 5 in the country and you're like, oh, this is now a possibility. Ohio State's down a little bit. They haven't figured out their defense. Like, the Big Ten's more open than it's been in a long time. Wisconsin's still dealing with the Graham Mertz saga there, and they finally don't have a running back they can rely on for most of the year. Like, it's open for us. Like, it felt early on last year. It's amazing, like, hindsight being 2020, but like, it just, you have to go back and read the pieces. You have to go back and watch and how we talked about Iowa in September and August and even October, and then where we came to at the end, and people remember the Michigan game and what happened there. But it was just, I'm so curious if you're an Iowa fan, because you're like, man, if we just have an average offense last year, and we're not in the 99 percentile of just all-time bad struggles with this kind of defense, why couldn't we be a smaller version of what Georgia did with Stetson and company? Because the defenses were pretty similar. Like, Iowa, the takeaways, what they were doing, and just how dominant that defense was, you're like, man, that kind of feels like a wasted opportunity, because you don't know when the Big Ten will be that open again and when you'll have that kind of special defensive season. I mean, Iowa's defense, you bet on it a lot, but man, I don't know. Like, was that something you were thinking about where you're like, they're going to be kicking themselves this offseason, where it's like that defense and that takeaway stuff was just unbelievable, and our offense should not have been that bad? Like, it just, the disparity between the offense and defense cannot happen again.
It's been a great run for the Iowa defense for
Mm-hmm.
several years, really, where they've had this level of play where they're getting, 20, 30 takeaways, 20, 30 sacks. They had a great run with guys like AJ Epinesa and Anthony
Mm-hmm.
Nelson, and Davion Nixon was the defensive player of the year in the Big Ten a couple of years ago, the pandemic year, and they've just continued to churn out. Phil Parker, he's got it figured out. The only school that's really figured them out on a consistent basis defensively has been Purdue. Jeff
Hmm.
Brom's got his number, and I don't know what it is, um, but they've been. I do a podcast during the football season with Chuck Long,
Mm-hmm.
who's our Iowa quarterback, runner up the Heisman Trophy in '85 season to Bo Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
And Chuck coached at Oklahoma. Chuck was head coach at San Diego State. He knows the game, and he's of the opinion that Iowa has probably missed out on at least two other Western Division championships because the offense has just been not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And last year it was kind of a perfect storm that got them into that Big Ten championship game because they're kind of in control, and then they just didn't play well in a couple games and gave some things back, but ended up getting in there. So thanks to the Gophers beating Wisconsin.
Do you think it's because it's interesting that you brought up the Brian Ferentz offensive verbiage and what they ask of these quarterbacks? Do you think part of that is to blame for the issues the last couple of years? Is that the scheme is so complicated and that it's so thought out, and they ask so much of the quarterbacks that like there's not enough juice. It's not free flowing enough. It's not just there. It's just so interesting. Like I highly encourage folks to watch an Iowa game and then watch Heupel's offense right after, and just see the disparity between the two. And it's not like it's wrong. And I would just love to know what Brian and Kirk are thinking, like what their strategy is there, or like why they don't adjust, because it seems like it is a level of stubbornness a little bit, right? Where they're like, this is the way that they, and part of it for me, I wonder, is like, we don't want to sacrifice the defense to flip up a lot, right? Like that feels like a big part of it.
Yeah, that is part of it. It's one hand washing the other kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing, and trying to do things. It's the defense is gonna they'll give you the opportunity to maybe march down the field a little bit, but they're
Mm-hmm.
gonna play bend but don't break kind of defense, and they're gonna force you into mistakes because they're not gonna make the mistakes. They're gonna
Yeah.
play quarter half coverage a lot in the secondary, and guys are just very disciplined. They do what they're supposed to do, and they're sure tacklers. So they just that Phil Parker has a thing that he shared with us a couple of years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and it's basically if they give up two or fewer explosive plays, like 25
Mm-hmm.
yards or more in a game, the opposing team is going to score 14 points or less.
Hmm.
On that defense. Now they may have a pick six or something, get a funny money kind
Mm-hmm.
of touchdowns. But if they give up more than two, they're going to probably give up 28 points.
Hmm.
So it's about limiting those big plays. And on offense, Kirk's philosophy is always going to be want to be balanced, want to run the football. That's just kind of how he's always going to be. It was funny because a couple of years ago with Tyler Goodson,
Mm-hmm.
they started running the Wildcat for a little.
Yeah.
And he used to joke about he used to like snicker when somebody bring up the Wildcat. He'd be,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, maybe we'll go out and run the Wildcat.
Mm-hmm.
And then he did it, and but then it disappeared by the end of the year, or the next year. It just kind of went away. But for Iowa's unique because I think everything really starts up front on both
Mm-hmm.
sides of the ball. It's not as much about a quarterback, or in fact, Brian Ferentz this spring called the quarterback position a facilitator, which raised some eyebrows.
Yeah.
Because I'm guessing that like Josh Heupel will not look at his quarterback as a facilitator.
No.
He's going to look at him as a playmaker.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just kind of where Iowa's philosophy is at. So, but it all starts up front with the offensive line. And the offensive line last year was, even though they had Tyler Linderbaum, who was a first-round draft pick of the Ravens, Remington Award winner, the offensive line wasn't great last year. They gave up 32 sacks last year. They only averaged 3.4 yards per carry last year. They had a lot of negative yardage plays. And if Iowa is starting to drive 2nd and 9, that's like them playing left-handed. It's just not. That's not the world they can live in. They need to start second and five.
Mm-hmm.
So that was part of it. Now the defensive line, which was a lot of new faces, but they really played well, and I think they're going to be good again next year, this coming year. And they've got Riley Moss back on defense at corner. They've got Jack Campbell, who I think is one of the best linebackers in the country at middle linebacker. So they got some dudes on defense, but it's going to come down to the offensive line, in my opinion, and if they get some decent quarterback play. If they do that, they'll win 9, 10 games. If they don't, it might be 7.
And you're bringing in, there's a 5-star at Iowa, right? There's a 5-star kid. Yeah. So that's pretty much locked in, right? He's an Iowa kid. I think I think it was Bama was the only other serious competitor for him.
He came in early too. He enrolled early.
Okay.
This year they had there's another kid that they brought in early, TJ Hall, who's a cornerback that I think's got a chance to play this year too. I think he's as good a corner as they've had as a true freshman. They kind of mentioned at the same level as Desmond King, who won the Thorpe Award. So, so that's some pretty heady company there. So we'll see. Wampa is, they have this cash position, which is kind of the hybrid, one of the linebacker positions, but they just kind of they've used a safety in that position.
So it's kind of like a star.
Yeah. Call it star, or I don't know what all these guys use those different technology for it. But
I like Cash though. Cash is pretty cool.
I like Cash, and he and the last 2 guys that have played that got drafted in the NFL. Amani Hooker, who's with the Titans, and then Dane Belton got drafted this year by the Giants. So there's a kid that they probably are going to plug in there. Wampa might be in there too, but there's another kid that's he's one of the best players that I've seen at the high school level. Just unreal. A kid named Cooper DeJean. He's a small town 1A football kid in Iowa, and he's just one of those kids that ball finds him. So I think they're trying to find ways to get him on the field. He played mainly special teams, but he's probably a safety by trade, but he was even playing corner last year a little bit late in the year when they were thin on numbers.
Interesting. I wonder too, for Iowa, there's some programs where I look at it where I'm like, okay, you kind of know who you are. The ethos is going to be the ethos. The identity is entrenched. And one of the things that you can do, like if you're an Iowa fan, you're like, okay, if we're going to be committed to this style of play and we're going to be committed to our quarterback being a facilitator, or was that the word you used? Facilitator? Yeah. And not a playmaker. Okay. Well, the transfer portal exists now. Like you can develop and do everything you want to do, but if you're frustrated with the inconsistencies of a Spencer Petras and you don't want to deal with a redshirt freshman under center that everybody wants, why not dip into the portal? Why not go after an upperclassman that can pop, and someone who has been just kind of what Nebraska did? They go after Casey Thompson. K-State brings in Adrian Martinez. Like, why has Iowa not been more active in the quarterback transfer portal market?
Yeah, simple answer is they feel like if they go in and get a quarterback that then that's going to cost them 2 more. And so, and they don't know that the person that they're going to get is better than what they have. So they're just like bird in the hand kind of thing.
Yeah. But you try it once, you see what happens. Like I think you had to dip out on that ledge at some point. Everybody, like that's one of those. Everybody's doing it, man. And I understand that too, though. I mean, Tennessee's dealing with that a little.
I'll say this: Iowa has not had a lot of turnover in the portal. I mean, I think they're number 2 least number of kids that have left into the portal. I think they only had 5 guys leave, and that's like abnormally low for these guys.
Why do you think that is?
I think part of it is the culture. And I think part of it is also, I think some of the kids are probably smart enough to realize that maybe the grass is not going to be as green
Mm.
because some guys that have left haven't, they'll end up, like, for example, one of the wide receivers that left last year, um, he ended up at Northern Iowa,
Hmm.
going down a level.
Yeah.
So, unless you've got something, to me, that's the big thing with the portal is these kids just make bad decisions because if you don't know going into the portal that there's going to be 3 or 4 schools that are at that same level or higher that are going to be there for you, I don't know if you risk it. Why risk it?
So it requires some tampering. Only enter the portal with some well vetted tampering.
That's the only way to get in there. It
Yeah.
is. And some of these, but yeah, well vetted would be the right word for it too, because
Mm.
some of these guys just they get people telling them the wrong thing. They get bad advice.
People,
It's unbelievable to me.
it
Some
it requires so much nuance, and just when you hear a lot of national talking heads or folks talk about it, or people, there's so much more going on behind the scenes, and it's so much more complicated in the way that people want to discuss it. But if you push back against anything in the portal or anything like that, it's like, oh, you can't be anti-player, and it's like, well, no, there's there's some real issues, and there's some real stuff that's happening behind the scenes, and there's a lot of kids being pushed in the wrong direction and being lied to by adults. And I think it was Aaron Taylor who had a good rant actually about this of like,
good video.
yeah, like we need like there needs to be some accountability. Like we have to protect these kids in a different kind of way where it's like they're getting led astray by different people and they're getting a lot of folks in their ear, and you know,
What they need is when guys put their name in before they put their name in for the draft, they can get advice on
mm-hmm.
that. They can get feedback. It's almost be worthwhile for the portal for the NCAA to set up a feedback thing where the kid can get feedback and say, yeah, you're probably not going to get any other D1 offers.
Yeah.
If you want a high D1 or Power 5 school offers, but you may want to go play somewhere, but you may have to go play at South Dakota State or
Yeah.
North Dakota State or Northern Iowa. And those are great programs. They're just not going to be on TV every Saturday.
I struggle with it because if I was in their shoes, like I understand where it's like you're putting a lot of faith in these coaches. They're like, hey, if you stay and you keep working, like you'll get there. And you're like, well, I only get one shot at this, man. And for some of these kids, it's like I get one shot at changing my life and my family's life forever. And it's a lot of trust, and it's a lot of difficult decisions that each of these kids have to make and think about. And they just put a lot of trust into folks they don't really know that well, which is also pretty scary.
And it's a financial decision now
Yeah.
too, with lots of kids.
Mm-hmm.
It's a financial decision that they're making as much as it is a football decision, because they're going to be offered financial rewards like Jordan Addison is, or guys like that are going to make a lot of money as a college football player, and more power to them. I mean, nobody's standing in the way of that, but
you cannot stand in the way of it and also recognize that it's bad for the sport, right? There's like this weird thing where people are like, oh, well, it's finally fair. I was listening to two folks that I really respect in college sports media, and I just disagreed where it's like there's a misunderstanding, I think, nationally. And I think you being on the ground in Iowa and just interacting with so many fans and seeing what fans are like, kind of me being in Knoxville and just being here and being a grad student and just being around Tennessee a bunch, is that there's a complete misunderstanding of what fans want and what they're worried about and their long-term concerns for college football and things like that, where I think something you miss is like, can you imagine if Larry Fitzgerald leaves Pittsburgh after his freshman year and just transfers to Alabama or Clemson or whatever and finishes his career out there? You can say, yeah, it was probably more financially lucrative for him to make that move while he was in college, but it worked out for him. But like the whole reason that we watch college football is like those kind of stories are cool. Like the West Virginia Pat White teams are cool. The surprise Marshalls with Byron Leftwich and Chad Pennington and Moss, and like when you see programs where talent is scattered all across the country and you find these diamonds in the rough or like these awesome stories that make you want to watch Pitt or keep up with Pitt or keep up with Iowa, because it's like, oh, Drew Tate is a wild man. I got to watch Drew Tate. Like that is something that's really cool and you want to do that. But if they become feeder schools for the big dogs because they can't financially compete the same way, then you have a major problem. Like you can say, yeah, this is better for Jordan Addison, but you can also say this is bad for the sport. Like, this is bad for viewership, and fans don't want this. And those are the people who are ultimately paying to go to these games. So you have to consider both here. You have, like, it can be good for players, and that's fine, and we're pro player, but you can also be honest about the ramifications that it has for the folks that love college football to begin with, right?
I'll tell you the because I brought this up on our message boards recently about just kind of taking the temperature of the room with Iowa fans and how many of them would contribute to a collective. Because I was trying to get one going. I know Tennessee's got the Aspire Sports thing.
Oh yeah, we're moving.
They're dishing out money left and right. I mean, they're getting millions of dollars.
Hold on, allegedly, Tom. Allegedly
millions of dollars to a quarterback. Allegedly, but they're doing things. Tyler Casper was one of the kids that they were after. I know Tyler for a long time. Kevin, his dad played at Iowa, so anyway, Iowa fans are just not. They're not comfortable in that world. This whole we're paying players now is just kind of like, yeah, this isn't the pool we've grown up in. It's just not. It's not in the DNA of Iowa athletics. So, and it never has been. So it's going to be a challenge for Iowa fans. Because I know I've talked to a couple of big boosters at Iowa, and they're of that opinion. They're like, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to really get involved with it. Because they're just like, I just don't feel comfortable. I love supporting Iowa athletics and the foundation and trying to build better facilities. But, the arms race for facilities is over, right? It's done. I mean, that's old news now. The arms race now is going to be who can offer the most money to players. That's what it's going to be. That's the arms race. And you're either going to be involved in it or you're going to fall back.
Yeah.
And I think some places the infrastructure was there and hit the ground running. And then other places it's not. And there's scuffling. I mean, Iowa's scuffling to get this thing going. Now, they'll get it going, but it's just not going to, it might be
happen overnight.
It might be just a couple $1 million.
Yeah.
Thing. Whereas,
but I think that's always been kind of the case with college football, though, right? Like, players have been getting paid, like the buckets of cash. I think it's just the difference when I've talked to folks who've been in the know for a long time. It's been like, oh, instead of $50K under the table, it's now $8 million. Like, it's just a totally different amount of money and a totally different, crazy amount of money for top recruits now.
And that's why Nick Saban was mad about all this stuff. Let's be honest. He's mad because they were probably doing things differently. Are able to operate in that world, and now everybody can operate in that world and openly. And
I think it's partly that, but I also think Saban knows that he's gonna it's one of those where he's like, all right, you want to do the portal? Guess what? Eli Ricks and Jahmyr Gibbs are on the way. You just want a title with this guy? Guess what? I'm bringing Burton in right after the.
But he'll say he didn't. There was no tampering ever.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just. I think Saban speaks in a way that's everything that he says is very pointed and calculated, and I don't know, he's just too smart, and it's just one of those where I like Saban a lot, but it is what it is. He's telling you, like, this is what's going to happen if you want to go down this road. I'll go down this road with you, but you don't want Alabama athletics and myself at the helm going down this road with you. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. We'll end on this, Tom. So. When you look at the schedule for Iowa football this fall, what pops for you? What is there a stretch of games that you're like, all right, this will define Iowa's season? What is it for you when you look at it? Does it feel like a Big Ten title or conference championship game appearance again, or no?
Could be. Could be. I think the key stretch is that October stretch around the Ohio State game. There's just Iowa hasn't gone to Ohio State for I think it's been 8 years now. It's just weird schedule.
Well, pods are coming, sir. ACC throwing them out there in 2023, and I've heard Big Ten might even be before them.
Yeah, they're going to do pods, so like Iowa will probably, I think, almost assuredly have Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Nebraska in their pod with them, and then kind of play outside that with other games.
And
But
Nebraska's become basically their rival, right? Is that real? Is this like the corn? Can we get a corn, like a some sort of corn statue or some?
that's the Cyhawk game. That's the Iowa
No, but I
State.
want corn for Corn Huskers in Iowa. I need some other corn related statue or something.
Yeah, the Iowa State one's always the corn one.
Yeah.
The Corn Bowl,
Mm-hmm.
if you will. And then Minnesota's the pig,
Yeah.
with and then Wisconsin's a bull,
Mm-hmm.
the Heartland Trophy. But the Nebraska one's been this Heroes Trophy where they honor people who've done good things, and that's great. But
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't, you know, doesn't doesn't pop the way it should.
No.
The only thing that's been cool is that it's really stuck with Black Friday,
Huh.
which I think has been nice. I like having that Friday game. I
Mm-hmm.
really do, because it's sort of nice, especially when it's in Iowa City, so I don't
Mm-hmm.
have to travel to Lincoln. And you're just home, and Saturday you can watch football all day.
What's the drive to Lincoln for you?
Lincoln's probably about 5 hours,
Okay.
so it's not terrible. Usually drive out to Omaha on Thanksgiving Day, and then just drive into Lincoln on Friday.
There you go.
So yeah, the bottom line, the schedule, it's just around that Ohio State game. There's some tough things. Michigan comes to Iowa City around that same time too. So it's just that stretch is going to be a challenge, I think, for Iowa. If they can navigate that, and then they're always going to finish. Seems like they load up with the divisional games in the last month. So it's like Illinois, Minnesota, Wisconsin at the end. So it's all. I always think like Iowa, Wisconsin is kind of like whoever wins that one generally has control of things. But I think Minnesota's going to be pretty good. I think Illinois is going to improve, and Nebraska, I'll believe it when I see it.
Okay, that's fair. They're
Three,
fun though. The Cardiac Huskers, they're fun, man.
3-9.
The best 3-9 team in college football history, sir.
Yes, that's what we've been told.
Mm-hmm. Tom, how do the good folks check out your work and everybody else across Hawkeye Report?
Yeah, go to HawkeyeReport.com or Iowa.rivals.com. You can hop on there. I'm at Hawkeye Report on Twitter, so you can check us out there as well. Covering a lot of things. We're ramped up our baseball coverage. I know that's sort of an SEC sport, but we've got a lot of good baseball coverage too for the Iowa baseball team, who's on their way to another 30-win season, and hopefully they're going to squeak in the NCAA tournament.
Okay, you don't want to date with my Tennessee Volunteers.
No, that Tennessee offense is just it's like the 27 Yankees.
It's a lot. It's a lot of fun, man. Being in attendance and being here for this. I think we're gonna go to Omaha. My dad and I think we're gonna book it. Like, I don't know if we'll ever see a Tennessee baseball team this good ever again. Like, this is just like one of a kind in a lot of ways. So I'm excited. We'll see what happens. We got to finish up with Georgia this weekend and then go to Mississippi State next weekend. So we'll see. Tom, thank you so much for making the time today. I greatly appreciate it, and we'll have to check back in again soon.
Thanks for having me on.